Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, you know.
You got a lot of fucking money right there. What the fucking was with you? Just give the fucking money to everybody. Why are you keeping the money right there? People need a fucking goddamn money.
Bienvenidos, señores, a otro video reacción del bicho 24/7. Por allí les puse ese inglés chabeleado de Álvaro Méndez que supera el de nuestro presidente de la República de El Salvador. Gente, como todos ya saben o sabían, ahora se llevó a cabo esa importante reunión del presidente Donald Trump con el presidente Bukele. Le traemos el video, partes en español, partes en inglés, la traducción, pero un poco tardecito, pero ya sabe que para ustedes siempre truene, llueve, relampaguee. Así es que déjenme ese likezote para arriba. Vamos a reaccionar a este video, gente. Buenísimo, buenísimo, buenísimo. No como el inglés de aquel señor que le acabo de poner. No, corre video, bicho. Corre video.
Why don't they put out numbers?
Yeah, 99%. I mean, it's crazy, right?
We're doing
it's
great.
A crazy turnaround.
Christy, could you maybe say a couple of words?
For the worst of the worst, that we have somewhere to put them.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent, and we interviewed him just to get some information, etc. from them. And he said, "Oh, well, I got arrested 6 times, but they released me the 6th time, so it should be released again." And then he said, "Well, but what's the last thing you do?" And he said, "Well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. I just shot him in the leg." And we're like, this guy was arrested 6 times here in the United States, 6 times. He was released 6 times, and in the he was released 5 times, and the last time he was sent to El Salvador, right? So he's not getting released. But the last time he shot a cop, actually, and he shot him in the leg. So these are, like you said,
right?
yeah, but there's something broken.
It's the liberal establishment. But they're not running things anymore in this country, and we're run by, and I don't say conservative, I don't say anything, we're run by people with great common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Because it's all common sense. Yeah. It's not liberal conservative, it's common sense.
Exactly.
And, do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? Because I know you have a lot of boxing in your
That's violence.
That's abuse of a
violence
woman.
Against women.
It's abuse of a woman.
Totally.
But we have people.
Gente, le pido un poco de disculpas por la traducción, pero nos ha costado traducir. Pero para que lo tenga usted un poquito allí al español, ¿verdad? Porque lo tengo al español.
They're not running things anymore in this country, and we're run by, and I don't say conservative, I don't say anything, we're run by people with great common sense.
Yeah, common sense.
Because it's all common sense. Yeah. It's not liberal conservative, it's common sense.
Exactly.
And, do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? Because I know you have a lot of boxing in your
That's violence.
That's abuse of a woman.
Against women.
It's abuse of a woman.
Totally.
But we have people that fight to the death because they...
Permitirle a los hombres ejercer el deporte de las mujeres es violencia contra la mujer. ¿Cómo un hombre de esas comunidades va a andar peleando en ligas de boxeo contra ligas que son femeninas? Y eso es lo que está diciendo el señor Donald. ¿Cómo es eso o era eso posible? Por eso que él suspendió todas esas prácticas y está muy bien. Hey, déjeme ese like.
I think men should be able to play in women's sports, and some of those sports it wouldn't matter much, but it still matters. But some of them are very dangerous for women.
Some years ago, I would say a decade ago or so, women's rights movements were pressuring so that we enacted specific laws to avoid men abusing women. And I think those laws were great because there were a lot of men abusing women. But now some of the same people are trying to backtrack on that and actually trying to make new laws allowing men to abuse women in sports. So actually that doesn't make sense.
Sports.
It doesn't make sense.
It's crazy. They have weightlifting records, right?
Yeah.
A woman gets up, lifts weights, she's incredible. A guy gets up and beats her by 100 pounds. What are you going to do? A record that hadn't been broken in 18 years. They put on an ounce, quarter of an ounce, eighth of an ounce for 18 years. Now they have a guy come up, ping, The whole thing is crazy, but they continue to fight. And I don't like talking about it because I want to save it for just before the next election. I say to my people, don't even talk about it because they'll change. And well, but I watched this morning, there was a congressman fighting to the death for men to play against women in sports. And you say to yourself, why? What are they doing, right? What are they doing? But your country's not too big in that.
No, of course not. We're big in protecting women.
We're good. That's right. It's a very important form of protection, too.
And as you can see, most of my cabinet are women, so.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's why you're
And
running.
they're not DEI hires or anything.
They
They're
can
just
be
great at what they do, right?
That's right. This is very impressive.
Yeah,
This
no.
is a first. We've had women, but we've never had 3 of them right here. That's
4 and 3
And
men.
look who we have. You guys feel a little bit mistreated? That's good. I like it. Well, we've been advanced. I've been very advanced in that regard too. We have Pam, who's been so
Yes, I know.
fantastic.
Christy.
And the most powerful woman they say
I
anywhere in the
know,
world.
exactly.
She's rated.
They're all afraid of her.
Susie Wells. They say, oh, she's tough. Most powerful woman in the world, according to magazines. What do I know?
Christie, la mujer más poderosa del mundo, le dijo el señor Trump. Jaja. Señores, déjeme el aizote. Allí está saliendo un poco chabeleado allí, ¿verdad? Los títulos para que, ¿verdad? Mis abuelos que no leen chiquito, que lo vean grande, pero ahí vamos.
But I think she probably is. She probably is.
Congratulations.
And you know, Stephen has done such a great job. We have great
He's
people.
very famous too.
But we love working with him. He really lets them have it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no games.
No. It's very good.
He knows. Do you have any questions, please? Go. Let's not start with CNN because they're just so wrong. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. You repeatedly mentioned last night that Russia's attack on Ukraine was a mistake. What is the exact mistake? And have you given Putin a deadline to actually move toward a ceasefire?
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is. We had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel, but I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it. And it was the apple of his eye, but there was no way that he would have done it. All you had to do is lower oil prices. If you lowered oil prices, Biden kept the prices so high because he made it impossible to get it. If you lowered oil prices, you would have never had the war. But you wouldn't have had it with me anyway. That war would have never happened. And I think it's a great abuse. So now what do? You get a country where 25% of its land is gone and the best locations, where millions of people are killed. You know, you haven't reported accurately the death. And this was Biden's war, and I'm trying to stop it. And I think we're going to do a good job. I hope we're going to do. They lose 2,500 young people a week, think on average. Now they're Russians and they're Ukrainians, but it's 2,000. We don't care. It's like whatever it is.
Intolerable.
They're not from your country. They're not from mine. But I want to stop it. 2,500. It's a killing field. It's like the Civil War. You take a look. I look at the satellite pictures. This should not be happening in our time. Of course, our time can be pretty violent, as we know. But that's a war that should have never been allowed to start. And Biden could have stopped it, and Zelensky could have stopped it, and Putin should have never started it. Everybody's to blame.
Have you spoken to President Zelensky, sir, about his offer to purchase more Patriot missile batteries?
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles. You know, he's against. Listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war, right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size, and then hope that people give you some missiles. If we didn't give them what we gave, remember, I gave them javelins. That's how they won their first big battle with the tanks that got stuck in the mud. and they took them out with javelins. They have an expression that Obama at the time, Obama gave them sheets and Trump gave them javelins. But just something that should have never happened. It's a really shame. The towns are destroyed. Towns and cities are, largely destroyed. They have the spires, the beautiful spires that go up. They say that we're the most beautiful in the world in Ukraine for whatever reason, but the most beautiful in the world, they're mostly laying on their side, shattered and broken. And most importantly, you have millions of people dead. Millions of people dead because of 3 people. I would say 3 people. Let's say Putin, number 1, but let's say Biden, who had no idea what the hell he was doing, number 2, and Zelensky. And all I can do is try and stop it. That's all I want to do. I want to stop the killing. And I think we're doing well in that regard. I think you'll have some very good proposals very soon.
Last question, sir. Have you attributed a motive, sir? Have you attributed a motive through the FBI investigation behind the attack on Governor Josh Shapiro over the weekend?
No, I haven't, but the attacker was not a fan of Trump, I understand, just from what I read and from what I've been told. The attacker basically wasn't a fan of anybody. It's probably just a whack job. And certainly a thing like that cannot be allowed to happen. Okay. I have a great relationship with this man. I have the best relationship with him. We've known each other. I've known him since he was a very young man, as I said, very, very young. And I was impressed. I said, look how this guy is. In fact, you sort of look like a teenager. You still you look like a teenager. I said, what kind of a country is this? He grew up well in the last 5 years.
Do you support the extension for nationals of El Salvador under
I support him.
Do you plan to ask
I support him. Go ahead. Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CNN. Low-rated. Which one is that?
the man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam. Would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, 2 courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job. Thank you, Pam. Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Could you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So we had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
any
Court is
help to get
asking
it back?
to.
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it from the court can only be directed to him.
I asked.
¿Usted lo liberaría, Presidente Bukele?
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's
I mean,
always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I.
Lean esto. Yo no estoy hablando mucho porque es importante para mí que usted, el que puede inglés, se lo traduzca ahí al camarada, y el que no puede inglés, que allí mire cómo lo va parando para irlo leyendo, ¿verdad? Un poco ahí adivinando, pero allí hemos hecho lo que hemos podido, señores. Así es que no le pidamos tanto al cocinero, porque hoy quizás el cocinero ni... Pero saludos, señores, para cada uno de ustedes. Siga dejando esa reacción.
Smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
You could release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our
I mean, there's
So
a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something?
Enfermo, le dije.
I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on your first lunch 2 days ago.
How long do we have to answer this question from you? Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over, and that's why nobody watches you anymore? You have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
President Trump, how many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please? As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it, because nobody can understand it. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country that are dangerous. Not just people, because we have people, but we have millions of people that are murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by other countries that were very smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark, and one of the doctors said, sir, I've never seen anybody get that was the highest mark. I hope you're happy with that, although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive, but I did do my physical and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I notice there's no question, so probably you are. But the cognitive, they said to me, sir, would you like to take a cognitive test? I said, did Biden take one? No. Did anybody take one? No, not too many people took them. I said, what about Obama? Did he take one? No, he didn't take one either. I said, let me be the only one to take one. But I've actually taken them 3 times already. I like taking them because they're not too tough for me to take. But we had a great physical exam, so I know you're going to ask that. And the doctors, who are total professionals, Walter Reed Medical Center, they're great people. And I visited a soldier that was badly wounded, incredible soldier, lost his leg, and we spent a lot of time with him. I mean, great with his mother, and it was really a very great thing. They do a phenomenal job. I just want to say, Walter Reed, I was there for, 5-6 hours. You were there with me. But I took a full physical, and it came out perfecto, so that's good. That means you've got me for a little longer.
Would you be willing to pay for those facilities to be open if you were going to be built?
I'd do something. We'd help them out. Yeah, we help them out. They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that, Steve, okay?
Tajante, totalmente tajante con la delincuencia, el señor Trump, tajante. Y yo le digo, yo lo estoy dejando a usted que usted mire el video completo, que lo disfrute.
Well, I do. I think everybody has to. I mean, the president said it better than anybody. He said, you know, you have liberty and you have to have liberty, but to have liberty, not everybody is going to be good. And, you know, some are bad because they're sick. They're mentally deranged. They're bad. And you have to take them. If you're going to have a country, you're going to have to take those people out. And we've been doing that. But this was like an unforced error, they would call it, where we had people that may hate our country, or maybe they're just stupid people. I think they're probably stupid people more so. A lot of people said they did it for the vote. But I did better with Hispanic people than they did, because I always use Hispanic. I did better. Your people love me. I saw my poll numbers in your country. I'm through the roof, right? 91%. No, some people think they do it for the vote. But they don't have to do it for the vote. They cheat. You know, they're professional cheaters. That's about the only thing they do well. So we just have had a great relationship, and it's become bigger because of a strange thing that happened. You know, I came back. We had no war in Ukraine. We had no war we had no October 7th Middle East problem. We had nothing. We had no inflation. We didn't have the Afghanistan most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. The Afghanistan, not withdrawing, because I would have been out. You know, I had it all set to bring people out with dignity and pride. That was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Afghanistan. We didn't have any of that. You wouldn't have had the war with Russia, Ukraine. You wouldn't have had the Middle East problem because Iran was broke. They had no money because we had secondary sanctions on and lots of other sanctions. And now every single thing, got a problem with Iran, but I'll solve that problem. That's almost an easy one. We got to solve a war that should have never started, Ukraine and Russia, and we'll get that solved. And we have to solve problems, and we already solved inflation. You know, if you look at the numbers are incredible, actually. Stock market's up, and we're not letting other countries take advantage of this country like they have for the last 40 years. So thank you very much. You have a question, please?
Mr. President, thank you so much. You scored another major investment win this morning when NVIDIA pledged to build its AI supercomputer, the first time ever, right here in the United States.
Thank you. That's a question I like. That's true.
What is your reaction to this announcement, sir, and how will this positively benefit Americans across the country?
Well, it's one of the biggest announcements you'll ever hear, because NVIDIA, as you know, controls that almost the entire sector, which is one of the most important sectors in the world, between chips and semiconductors and everything else. And they're the biggest. And the other biggest we already have coming in and spending $300 billion, as you know. They announced.
Señores, esta es parte de la reunión que tuvieron hoy este día el presidente Bukele con el presidente Donald Trump. Una reunión que se trasladó hacia otra dirección, que traemos la segunda parte en el otro video reacción, unas sorpresas que te vas a llevar en la segunda parte, pero ahí te dejo la primera. Dame ese likezote para arriba y ya sabes, suscríbete al canal y sigamos creciendo para arriba. Casi no hablé por respeto a los dos mandatarios. Grabate eso. No es porque no quisiera reaccionar como dice aquel. I don't know what you say, dice, ¿verdad? I don't know what you say.